The console blinked, a single green pulse against the quiet hum of the bridge, and Yilla stared at it. Unsure, her fronds curling in sudden tension as the unfamiliar signal grew stronger each second. Passing like a heartbeat in her ears that were not ears, but delicate audio. Skin evolved for silence, and still she heard the pulse of something old, something forbidden, something from tales not told aloud. Since her hatch time, the stories about the beings who fell from fire and rose in blood, the ones called human. She leaned closer, eyes wide, skin cool. The signal looped on a low band, ancient in its language, older than any she was trained to decrypt, yet unmistakably synthetic and deliberate. A call, not an accident, not a drifting echo from space junk. It was crafted, it was aimed, and it was headed straight for their sector, her world, her orbit, and the whispers her grand nest mother once sang before her death, clawed by unknown spores, came crawling back into her thoughts as she tapped the translator on with trembling fingers. The message unfolded in low digital growls, the kind of speech that sounded more like thunder and war and ash than anything else. And still the translator peeled back layer after layer, until it rendered one phrase clearly, with no room for confusion. We remember, and her vision blurred because that was what the myths warned about, that humans never forgot, never forgave, and never stopped coming. And if one was here, more would follow, and if more followed, no stars would be safe, not even the coldest ones. She reported it, of course, her voice shaking and her pride buried under waves of ancestral dread. But the orbital assembly only laughed, their wings fluttering in amusement, their sensors confirming her reading, but their belief locked in tradition and denial. No human ship has been seen in 10,000 rotations. They said they are dust. They are myth. They are what we tell hatchlings to scare them into obedience. Go rest, young scout. Let the real sentience handle real threats. But she could not rest, not while that signal still pulsed every hour without fail. So she left her post, left the station, and took her nestcraft down the gravity well to the old ruins hidden on the shadow side of Velner 3. Where it was said the first landing happened, and where metal bones still stuck from the soil like teeth from some buried predator. And she ran her hands along the hulls, burned into the stone, and saw writing matching the radar ping, and knew beyond knowing that the stories were not warnings. They were instructions. They were survival guides for a war that had simply paused, not ended. She returned to orbit on stolen clearance, her craft small enough to dodge the passive nets, and saw it there final, not just on radar, but real, a wedge of dark, glinting fury tearing at spacetime itself. Not sleek, not alien, not beautiful, just dangerous, just human. And she opened a channel, not knowing what she would say, not knowing what they would answer, only that if she stayed silent, then everything would repeat again and again and again until her people were myths in someone else's story. The voice came through hard and dry, male or machine, or both. She could not tell. It said, identify. And she said her name, her species, her purpose, and it paused, and then said again, identify, but this time with weight, with memory, with pain. And she said again, I am Yilla of the Viral. I am alone, and I am not hostile. And the voice replied, not yet. And that was when she understood the human mind was not like theirs. It kept score across generations, across centuries, and she was speaking to a war, not a person. The human ship passed by her orbital moon, and the clouds beneath turned gold as its thrusters kicked against gravity. And she saw the assembly ships rise to intercept, and then she saw them fall one by one like leaves in a storm, not because they were weak, but because they were predictable. And she felt sorrow and terror and awe all at once, because the human ship did not gloat, did not signal again. It only moved with purpose toward something old, something it had marked long before her people even woke to the stars. She returned to the ruins, not as a scout, but as a believer, digging through old stories, through fragments and forbidden glyphs. Now sure they were not myths, but memories. And she realized the true warning was never about humans. It was about forgetting them, about letting comfort erase. Vigilance about assuming fire would never return to a forest just because it once burned. And as she looked up and saw a second human ship arrive in orbit, she knew it was too late for her world, but maybe not for others. And so she began to record her story in every tongue she could, before the light above her turned to shadow. Her claws scraped across the ancient surface, etching her symbols into the last clean wall of the ruins as above her the sky thundered with engines too vast to be natural, too exact to be spared. And she did not cry, though her eyes burned, for she knew now what must be done, not to save her world, but to plant a seed for whatever might come after. And she spoke aloud as she carved, for the recorders would fail, and the dataspheres would die, but stone would remain. And so she said, if you find this, know we were proud, but foolish. We were warned, but chose laughter. And now, we pay in silence. And she signed her name, not as a scout, not as Viral, not even as Yilla, but simply as witness. And when the light finally came, pouring down through the shattered clouds, she stood, not to fight, not to flee, but to watch. Because stories deserve endings, and endings must be told. And even if none survived to hear it, she would be the last voice of her people and the first to say the humans have returned, and this time, they do not come with words,